Egypt, Jordan rejects any forced displacements of Gazans. And Israel launches airstrikes, killing at least 10 Palestinians. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Brendan Lepore. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah II rejected any forced displacements of Gazans after United States President Donald Trump floated an idea to move Palestinians from the territory to the two Arab countries.
In his first public response to Trump's comments, Sisi described that displacing the Palestinian people from their land is an injustice. Speaking at a press conference in Cairo with Kenyan President William Ruto, he added that Egypt's historic position in favor of the creation of a Palestinian state can never be compromised. Sisi said Egypt was nonetheless determined to work with President Trump, who seeks to achieve the desired peace based on the two-state solution. Meanwhile, in Brussels, Jordan's King Abdullah II stressed his country's firm position on the need to keep the Palestinians on their land and to guarantee their legitimate rights. Since the start of the war, both Egypt and Jordan have warned of plans to displace Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank across their borders. Both countries are heavily reliant on foreign aid, with Washington serving as one of their largest donors.
An Israeli airstrike on Wednesday killed at least 10 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, as confirmed by the Palestinian Health Ministry. Palestinians' Red Crescent said the airstrike was in the area of Tubas in the northern West Bank.
Violence in the West Bank has surged since the start of the war in Gaza. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, many of them armed gunmen, but also including stone-throwing youths or uninvolved civilians, and thousands have been arrested by Israeli forces. The West Bank, a kidney-shaped stretch of land about 100 kilometers long, was seized by Israel in the 1967 Middle East War and is seen by Palestinians as the core of a future independent state, along with Gaza. Israel has stepped up operations in the West Bank since a ceasefire in Gaza came into effect on 19 January.
A Turkish ship loaded with aid bound to Gaza has docked in Egypt's Arish port on Wednesday. Turkish ambassador to Egypt, Salih Mutlu, said the ship contains over 10,000 tents, around 15,000 blankets, tens of portable toilets and hundreds of generators, as he oversaw the loading in Arish port.
He added that once they are able to transition to the second and third phase of the aid distribution, and then the ceasefire in Gaza is sustainable and lasting, then Turkey will be sending aid ships through Egypt port in a very frequent manner. Mutlu said the rate of sending ships to Gaza would be probably 2 ships in a month or more. The truce deal struck between Israel and Hamas requires at least 600 truckloads of aid to enter Gaza each day of the initial 6-week ceasefire, including 50 carrying fuel. Half of those trucks are supposed to go to Gaza's north. A second stage of the truce, which will decide what happens to more than 60 hostages, including men of military age, as well as a full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, is due to begin by next Tuesday.
Syria's de facto leader Ahmed al-Shara was named president for a transitional period. The Syrian state news agency reported the matter on Wednesday, citing Commander Hassan Abdel Ghani.
Shara was also authorized to form a temporary legislative council for the transitional phase, which will carry out its tasks until a new constitution is adopted. The announcements emerged during a meeting in Damascus attended by commanders of armed forces that fought alongside Shara's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to oust Bashar al-Assad from power. In less than 2 months, al-Shara has risen from opposition force leader to interim president after his group led a lightning offensive that toppled Bashar al-Assad. The tall, sharp-eyed man has held a succession of interviews with foreign journalists, presenting himself as a patriot who wants to rebuild and reunite Syria, devastated and divided after almost 14 years of civil war. However, Shara has yet to calm misgivings among some analysts and Western governments that still classify his group as a terrorist organization.
In other news, dozens were killed and at least 60 got injured in a pre-dawn stampede at the Kumbh Mela in northern India. Police said on Wednesday as tens of millions gathered to take a dip in sacred river waters on the most auspicious day of a 6-week Hindu festival.
Senior police officer Vaibhav Krishna told reporters that 90 people were taken to the hospital after the stampede, of whom 30 had died. He said the devotees who were sleeping were trampled by the crowd. Distraught relatives queued up to identify those killed by the stampede, which occurred when crowds surged towards the confluence of 3 rivers, where immersion is considered particularly sacred. The world's largest congregation of humanity, the Kumbh Mela, has already seen gigantic daily crowds with nearly 148 million people attending since it began 2 weeks ago. Authorities had expected a record 100 million people to throng the temporary township in Prayagraj on Wednesday for the holy dip, considered the most auspicious day due to a rare alignment of celestial bodies after 144 years.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Wednesday that her government will send a letter to Google after the internet giant said it would change the name of the Gulf of Mexico for users of Google Maps in the United States.
The U.S. government said on Friday it had officially changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. On Monday, Google said that when official names vary between countries, users see the local official name. Sheinbaum said that changes to the names of international waterways could be approved by international organizations and not by individual countries.
Para poder cambiar un nombre de un mar internacional, pues no es un país quien lo cambia, es una organización internacional. Entonces, estamos enviando esta carta a Google, la vamos a enviar hoy, y mañana, si les parece, explicamos cómo se define esto, ¿no? Porque no puede ser nada más a definición de un...
Google said that users outside the United States will continue to see both the original and new names of the Gulf of Mexico and the Nali, and it's always the case for disputed locations.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis denied that he was attempting to conceal who was to blame for a train crash that killed 57 people in 2023. Mitsotakis has been under pressure over Greece's worst ever rail tragedy, with more than 40,000 protesters turning out on Sunday in Athens and Thessaloniki, demanding justice for the victims and their families.
The Conservative Premier insisted he is not the orchestrator of a cover-up in an interview with Alpha Television, almost entirely dedicated to the disaster on 28 February 2023. That day, shortly before midnight, a train with more than 350 passengers travelling from Athens to Thessaloniki collided head-on with a freight train 350 kilometers north of the capital. Many of the accident's 57 victims were students. In the 2 years since, Mitsotakis' centre-right administration has faced accusations of negligence and criminal wrongdoing. In the aftermath, the accident was blamed on faulty equipment and human error, while the head of a nearby station was charged. But a recently leaked expert's report found that the train was carrying an illegal and unreported load of explosive chemicals, which contributed to the hefty death toll.
Amazon sued for allegedly tracking customer movements. That's up next. Stay tuned. Amazon.com was sued by consumers who accused the retailing giant of secretly tracking their movements through their cell phones and selling data it collects.
According to a proposed class action in San Francisco federal court, Amazon obtained backdoor access to consumers' phones by providing tens of thousands of app developers with code known as Amazon Ads SDK to be embedded in their apps. This allegedly enabled Amazon to collect an enormous amount of time-stamped geolocation data about where consumers live, work, shop, and visit. Also revealed sensitive information such as religious affiliations, sexual orientations, and health concerns. The complaint was filed by Felix Kolotinsky of San Mateo, California, who said Amazon collected his personal information through the, quote, speed test by Ookla app on his phone. He says Amazon's conduct violated California's penal law and a state law against unauthorized computer access. He seeks unspecified damages for millions of Californians.
Meta Platforms forecasts first quarter revenue below Wall Street estimates. The forecast signals its bets on pricey artificial intelligence-powered tools was struggling to attract ad dollars to its social media platforms.
The company expected quarterly revenue between $39.5 billion and $41.8 billion compared with analysts' average estimates of $41.72 billion. Slower digital advertising sales at Meta suggested a possible sector-wide weakening as brands brace for proposed U.S. policies in the U.S. that could destabilize the global economy. The miss raises fresh spending questions for Meta, which relies on its core social media ads business to cover the costs associated with its AI ambitions. Family daily active people, a metric used to track unique users who open any of its apps in a day, rose about 5% from a year earlier to 3.5 billion. The results follow CEO Mark Zuckerberg's announcements last week that Meta plans capital expenditure of as much as $65 billion in 2025 to expand its AI infrastructure.
The Federal Reserve left interest rates in the 4.25% to 4.50% target range on Wednesday and gave little insight into when further easing may take place in an economy where inflation remains above target, growth continues, and the unemployment rate is low.
The Fed is now in a holding pattern as officials await further inflation and jobs data and clarity on the impact of President Donald Trump's policies. After several months in which inflation data have largely moved sideways, the U.S. Central Bank dropped from its latest policy statement language saying that inflation, quote, has made progress towards the Fed's 2% inflation goal. Powell on Wednesday said he has had no contact so far with President Donald Trump and declined to comment on Trump's remark last week that he would demand lower interest rates from the central bank.
I'm not going to have any response or comment whatsoever on what the president said. It's not appropriate for me to do so. The public should be confident that we will continue to do our work as we always have, focusing on using our tools to achieve our goals and really keeping our heads down and doing our work, and that's how we best serve the public. An area that's having.
And moving on, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz warned the conservative CDU opposition on Wednesday it plans to curb migration would break EU law, adding the European Court of Justice has never accepted that.
During a speech to Parliament, Scholz said only Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban had dared doing so, with what Scholz described as fatal signalling effects for other states. Germany's government and opposition parties duelled earlier this week over rival border control policies, with opposition leader Friedrich Merz favoured to become next chancellor, saying he would advance his plan with the help of the far right if needed. Merz has called for tighter border controls and more police powers, a signal he's putting migration at the heart of his election campaign. in a bid to counter the far right, whose anti-immigrant theme has been magnified by a fatal stabbing in Aschaffenburg this month, for which a failed asylum seeker has been arrested. Germans elect a new parliament on 23rd February.
Former United States Senator Bob Menendez was sentenced on Wednesday to 11 years in prison for taking bribes, including gold bars, in exchange for favors for Egypt and New Jersey businessmen. U.S. District Judge Sidney Stain imposed the sentence at a hearing in Manhattan Federal Court following Menendez's conviction last July.
The judge ordered Menendez to begin his prison term on 6 June, allowing him to attend his wife Nadine Menendez's corruption trial starting in March. Menendez, a once powerful Democrat who represented New Jersey for more than 18 years in the Senate, was found guilty in July on all 16 felony counts he faced, including bribery and fraud. He was also found guilty of acting as a foreign agent, a first for a U.S. senator. Outside the courthouse, Menendez called his prosecution, quote, "nothing but a political witch hunt." Prosecutors with the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office sought a 15-year sentence for Menendez. They say he shepherded military aid to Egypt, provided assistance to Qatar, and interfered in local prosecutions of allied businessmen in exchange for bribes, including gold, cash, and a Mercedes-Benz.
Thanks for staying with us. Democratic Republic of Congo President Felix Tshisekedi vowed to mount a vigorous coordinated response to reclaim territory seized by M23 rebels who captured the eastern city of Goma earlier this week.
In a televised address, Tshisekedi accused Rwanda of backing the M23 insurgency, describing their actions as a, quote, terrorist enterprise on Congolese soil. The president said he had convened emergency meetings with government and military officials to assess the situation and plan countermeasures. His speech came as M23 forces reportedly advanced south towards Bukavu, capital of South Kivu province, raising fears of an expanded conflict in the mineral-rich eastern Congo. M23 captured Goma on Monday after intense fighting, marking their most significant advance since resurging in 2021. The group claims to fight for Congolese Tutsi rights. Congo and the United Nations accused Rwanda of supporting M23, allegations Kigali consistently denies. On Tuesday, the rebels captured Goma's international airport, raising fears of a prolonged occupation. The city's fall has severed vital supply routes, threatening aid to hundreds of thousands of displaced people in eastern Congo.
The Economic Community of West Africa States, or ECOWAS, on Wednesday announced the formal exit of junta-led Mali, Burkina Faso and Nigeria from the bloc following their withdrawal last year. West Africa has been rocked by spate of coups that has countries in the 15-member body under military rule in the past 5 years.
The three states announced their withdrawal from the bloc last January after ECOWAS demanded a restoration of democratic rule in Niger following a military coup in 2023. Instead, the three breakaway states formed an alliance of Sahel states, an alternate bloc, and launched their own biometric passports. ECOWAS said on Wednesday the remaining members tentatively agreed to, quote, keep ECOWAS doors open. by recognizing national passports and identity bearing the bloc's logo from the countries, to continue trade under existing regional agreement and to continue diplomatic cooperation with the countries. In December 2024, ECOWAS gave Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger a 6-month grace period to rethink their exit.
Spanish Coast Guards rescued a group of 62 migrants off the Canary Islands on Wednesday and transferred them to the port of Argenteuil in Gran Canaria. The Red Cross said the migrants rescued 10 miles off the Spanish archipelago were all men and included 4 minors.
Spain has moved to the forefront of the European Union's migration crisis, has tighter controls in the Mediterranean, pushed more migrants to attempt the perilous trip from West Africa to the Canaries. The 7 Spanish islands of northwestern Africa's Atlantic coast are struggling to absorb a surge in irregular migrants, mainly from Mali, Senegal and Morocco. According to data from the Interior Ministry, the Spanish archipelago hit an all-time annual high for a second year in a row, with 46,843 arrivals in 2024, constituting 73% of the irregular migration to Spain. Based on latest Interior Ministry data, at least 3,223 migrants have made it to the Canary Islands in 2025.
Construction of Basra's new sewage treatment facility, which began in 2022 and it's one of its largest kind, is aimed to be completed by 2026. Located where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers merge near the Gulf at Iraq's marshy southern tip, Basra is one of the few cities in the Middle East without an effective water treatment system.
This facility was set up to combat the heavily polluted river water that finds its way into drinking water. Shatt Al Arab River, once a vibrant freshwater lifeline that runs through Basra, is now so polluted it threatens the lives of more than 4 million inhabitants of Iraq's second city. Basra had an advanced sanitary infrastructure in the 1960s, but that broke down decades ago. The facility, costing 120 billion Iraqi dinars, will also use the treated water of irrigating farms, feeding the marshes, and using the waste in agriculture to manufacture fertilizers for crops. The building of the facility suffered an initial setback following the departure of Japanese investment due to threats during protests in 2018.
In sports, Man City digs deep to keep UCL campaign alive. Stay tuned.
Setiap pasukan terus gagah berdiri, mempertahan maruah, mencipta sejarah, tidak centasakan, terus memburu peluang, meletus ledakan, satu perjuangan, satu sorakan kemenangan, tiada mencari buruan, hanya di RTM, rakan bergiat, rakan bernyar, hanya di RTM, rakan bergiat, rakan bergiat.
Taking a look at the Champions League, Manchester City kept their league campaign alive by beating Club Brugge 3-1 in a nervy must-win match on Wednesday thanks to goal from Mateo Kovacic, substitute Savinho, and an own goal from their Belgian opponents.
Brewers stunned the Etihad Stadium crowd seconds before halftime when Ferran Jukla beat Mateus Nunes before sending in a long cross that Rafael Onyadika smashed into the back of the net. Mateo Kovacic levelled in the 53rd minute when he dribbled through the heart of Brewers' defence before unleashing a shot from the edge of the 18-yard box into the bottom corner. City went ahead 9 minutes later when Joel Ordóñez slid to block Josko Guardiol's cross but knocked it into the net, and then Savinho had a third in the 77th minute when John Stones played a pinpoint cross-field ball that the Brazilian chested down before firing it past keeper Simon Mignolet. The victory in their league phase finale secured Pep Guardiola's man a spot in a two-legged playoff knockout round.
The next round, we were also ambitious. And
meanwhile, Real Madrid hoped to avoid Manchester City in the next round. Its manager Carlo Ancelotti said this after they beat Brest 3-0 on Wednesday to reach the Champions League playoff where they will be seeded. The Spaniards missed direct qualification to the last 16 due to a poor start in the league phase with 3 losses during the first 5 matches. The holders will face either Celtic or Manchester City in the two-legged playoff in February with the second leg at home. The draw will be held on Friday in Nyon in Switzerland.
Boca Juniors missed out on their first win in the Argentine Primera Division's Apertura tournament. This is after a last-gasp Franco Fragapane goal for Union cancelled out Marcelo Saracchi's early opener for the visitors on Wednesday.
Boca coming off a draw against Argentinos Juniors in their Sunday opener. They put in a solid performance in the first half, grabbing the lead just 5 minutes into the game after Saracchi hammered a powerful strike off the crossbar and into the net. The second half saw the hosts pushing for an equalizer, but they struggled to create any clear-cut chances to breach a solid Boca backline. This is until Fragapane pounced on the loose ball into the box to fire low and find the winner 2 minutes into stoppage time. Earlier, in the 78 minutes, substitute Kevin Zenion could have extended Boca's lead, but goalkeeper Thiago Cardozo blocked his attempt in a one-on-one.
In 2025, Malaysia opens its doors to ASEAN, a celebration of unity and culture, bringing every moment of ASEAN 2025 to you, only on RTM.
That wraps up all today. This time around, in our top story, Jordan rejects any forced displacements of Gazans. Before we go, Happy Chinese New Year to those celebrating. Stay safe. Till then, I'm Brendan Lepal, Melissa Madani from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Take care.